Hello, everybody. So today we're going to be covering the Universal Audio, the 6176 channel strip. Basically, this device is kind of like a combination of the 610 preamp, a very old preamp, and the 1176 compressor. It's a very famous compressor. I did a video on that one too. So basically, this device is kind of like, if you look at the manual, it says, why would you want this over the 610 and its 1176 combo? One is price. Obviously, instead of buying two 610s and a 1176, which can be very expensive, you can get this, which is kind of both in one. Also, it takes up less space too. So this is kind of like a more modern device. But at the same time, it kind of gives you everything that you need if you really want that 610 to 1176 sound. One thing that's kind of a little, I guess, controversial about the 610 preamp, either on its own or in this combo unit, is it has a really kind of robust, round, bolstery, low-end sound. It's a very kind of vintagey sound. It depends on what you use it on, but a lot of people, it kind of like blows out the ass underneath of everything. If you put bass in there, or some guy has a very low voice, it might sound really distorted, really kind of blown out. So you have to be very careful with your levels on this device. And it has a few little tricks and things, especially in the preamp section that we'll get into, if you want to use this the right way, you have to be very careful about your levels and kind of understand what's going on inside of it in order to set it right. That being said, if you do know what you're doing, it's a really good preamp. Like if someone's very nasally, has a kind of like a nose kind of sound, or maybe like a thinner voice, this is really good for filling out that bottom. And yeah, so let's get into it. So like I was just saying, the really important thing about this device in the upper left there, when you see the gain knob, that is a gain. So the whole thing is gain, right? Like the big knob is you setting the level. So that's a type of gain too. However, this gain in the upper left, in my opinion, is probably one of the most important parts about this device. Because what it's doing is it's adjusting the gain of the input stage, right? And you can go from -10 to +10 there in 5 dB increments. And basically, when you change this, it doesn't only just change the gain, it is also changing the negative feedback loop, and it's changing the harmonic distortion of the preamp, right? So if you have it at 0 there, basically, it's kind of like you're getting a good amount of that 610 sound in there. And sometimes, depending on what you're doing, like a low voice or bass, maybe you don't want so much of that harmonic distortion, right? So if people complain about using this and it's distorted or muddy or it doesn't sound good, try that on -10 or -5. That's the settings that they recommend for it being kind of like a more quote unquote clean sound, right? So if you want it to be more clean, or you're using this preamp and it sounds kind of blown out or shitty, maybe too vintagey, try setting that at -10 to -5, and that's going to reduce some of that harmonic distortion. And that'll allow you to use this in a more clean way, right? On the other end there, that +5, +10, that means you really want that vintage sound. I probably want to recommend that on something kind of thinner, maybe not as full-bodied, because this thing can really give you a lot of body if you use it right. But if you're using it, you don't like the sound, try that -10, -5. And that'll make everything a little cleaner going throughout the whole thing. That's even before it gets to the preamp, really, right? So you're setting that, and that's kind of like the sound of the whole preamp that you're setting right there. Next, below it, it has the input select. This is pretty simple. Basically, you have your mic selection there for microphones. You have the high Z on the right, which is for plugging into that jack on the front. So that's for guitars, basses. And then you have the line input, which is for the back. This is if you want to use it kind of like in a mixing situation where you're like, oh, I just want the tone of it. Maybe you recorded vocals with something else and you just want the tone of the 610, maybe to give it body. You can use this in a line kind of context. So these are for signals that are basically plugged in the back that are already up to level. The microphone there, it's kind of strange. It has two different kind of like selections that you can do between the impedance, the 500 ohms, 2000 ohms. And basically it's saying, different microphones have different ohm settings. So try to match it. It's designed to try to match it. But at the same time, you can kind of experiment with the two different sounds. Even in the manual, it says, just try experimenting with what sounds better for your particular microphone. Same thing with the high Z. Basically, it has those two settings too, the 47,000 ohms, 47K, or the 2.2 million ohms. And they say, the 47 is better for like active pickups. So if you have an active bass pickup or an active guitar pickup, it's better for that. And the 2.2 million one is better for more passives. So that'd be like a passive pickup. But same thing, a lot of those, like, it's not really that hard of a line, and it's art. So basically, kind of, if you're playing a bass plugged in or a guitar plugged into it, kind of switch between those two and see what kind of sounds better. So up there they have the minus 15 dB pad. This just kind of reduces the mic input signal. It does it by about 15 dB, and that's why it says it there. Just kind of, if you have a lot of kind of a really sensitive microphone and there's a lot of room noise and stuff like that, if you want to just kind of clean up your signal, to flip up that pad there, and that'll make it like a more tight sound. Try to get rid of some of that room sound or like ambience. So the big knob here, that's the level select. That's obviously the important part. This is what you're going to be sending to the preamp stage. So it's not the same as that one in the upper left where you're setting the gain of the input transformer. This one is your actual level. So whatever signal is coming in, this is where your preamp's going to happen. This is where the magic happens. This is where your signal will come up in level, and also where the colorization and kind of all the effects of the 610 preamp come into play. And the level there, those numbers, they don't really correspond to dB. It's just kind of like, this is how much level you're adding to the preamp. So yeah, this is the main knob, right? That's why it's so big. So basically, this is what you're going to use to lift your level up. It has two EQs there. These are both shelving EQs. So these are not EQs for like setting the sound of your mix or setting the sound of anything. These are the EQs of just the preamped signal itself. So you're kind of shaving the ends off, right? So if you have something that's higher pitch or like higher in frequency, you don't really need those low level in there. You don't need those weird sub basses, or maybe you're recording a vocalist and there's a weird low hum in the room or something. So you're going to use these to kind of shave off the ends. They're both shelves. And you're kind of just sculpting your sound where you're like, okay, I don't need to have all these other sounds that are out of the range of the instrument or the thing I'm trying to record. It has a phantom power switch. That's for powering any sort of large diaphragm condenser. Just make sure that it's not like you always have that on or off. Make sure you know what you're doing. And if you have a microphone that needs to be powered, run power to it. Otherwise, it's usually better to not run power. So make sure your microphone is rated to receive phantom power and needs phantom power to work. So in the middle there, it has the join/split switch. This is if you want to, like if you have the hardware unit on the back, you can use the compressor and the preamp individually. But if you put join, then you're using this in a channel strip mode, which means your signal will flow from the preamp, and then from the preamp it goes straight into that compressor, and you get that combined sound. So that's the advantage of the channel strip, right? Is you get to have your preamp and your compressor all in one. So by the time it hits your box, by the time you're recording, so either it'll go to tape or go to your computer more likely. If you're recording, you get the preamp and the compressor all in the hardware before it goes into your box. And that's kind of like the power of an analog channel strip. So on the right side is basically the 1176 compressor section. It's very similar, obviously, on the inside to a 1176. The knobs are a little different. But in general, it's kind of the same thing there. So you have an attack knob. It goes from 20 microseconds to 800 microseconds. So this attack is very fast. It can definitely squash things if you don't know what you're doing. And something a little different for Universal Audio, and it's kind of nice because on the actual machine, whether you're using the plugin or the real machine, on the left it says slow, on the right it says fast. So that can be a little confusing because on the 1176, it's kind of backwards. So in this one, you can just see here, you go fully left counterclockwise, that's slow, and then you go from slow to fast. You have the release time there. The release time goes from 500 milliseconds on its fastest down to 1,100 milliseconds on its slowest. Next there, you can see the meter. This you can choose between pre-gain reduction and compressor on the hardware unit. And on the plugin, you'll be able to choose between input, gain reduction, and output. So this is a really important thing to switch between. We'll get into it more in the examples, but you want to be very careful and aware of what you're putting into this machine, what's coming out of it, and then the effect of the compressor, right? So that input there, you want to probably look at that to make sure that you're not overloading the entire plugin and or hardware before you even begin. So make sure you set a really good input level, so that's coming into the machine, And then after you do all your processing, after you lift up the level in the preamp, after you do all your compression, you want to make sure that the output is pretty a good level as well. That way it's not distorting within the unit. It has a ratio selector knobs. That's basically how much you want to compress. So you can compress, you can even limit. And then it also has that all mode, which is a representation of the all buttons mode in the 1176. The all buttons mode is very, very aggressive. It has kind of like a weird color to it. A lot of people like it on drums and stuff, but the compressor is pretty fluid. You can use it like the 1-to-1 and the 4-to-1 are more compression, and the higher numbers there, those are more for limiting. So I'll be doing a few examples and kind of showing you how I would set this on something, and kind of talk through it as you see the video of the knobs being set. You'll be able to hear the audio of it, but then you'll also kind of see how to set the levels correctly. I'll show you one example of it in a more kind of like clean way, and then one in a more kind of like, okay, let's really push this thing so you can hear that distortion that some people like and some people don't. It really depends, I think, on what you're using it on. So that's pretty much it. It's a very versatile kind of channel strip. It kind of locks you into a certain sound, but it does it really well. If you want to have the hardware version of it, it's a much cheaper option than buying the 610 and the 116 individually, and also takes up less space, so that's pretty cool. Yeah, definitely if you want to fill out the bottom of something or you want that kind of vintage sound, definitely go for it. The 1176 on its own is an amazing compressor, so you get that here. And then on top of that, you get a way to raise a signal. Yeah, so overall, it's a great machine. Yeah, by the time if you process a signal and it goes through the preamp and the compressor and it hits your box, already you're going to be working with a great signal there. So you can't go wrong with that. So thank you for watching.